Welcome to your next project. This is going to be a bookfinder application, and we're going to be using the Google Books API. So the interface is very simple. We just have one little search input box here, and I'm just going to type in an H, and this is really slow because it's virtual. And as soon as I type that in, it's going to make a request to the API and get any books that match that query. Okay, so if I type in a T, it should make another request, an M, makes another one, and then an L, which is extremely slow. Okay, so now we have books that match the query HTML. So let's say we want this one. You can see we're getting the image, getting the title and the subtitle. If I click on this, it's going to go into a details page, which slides over from the right, and you can see we have a go back button. We have the image, which is a little blurry because for some reason they only give you thumbnails, which are really small. And then we have the subtitle and the title, the description, which we limited to 10 lines. And if we scroll down here, you'll see the publisher, the published date, the page count, the average rating, and then a preview book button, which will open up in WebView browser and bring you to the Google Books preview page. Okay, it's going to ask us if we want to use WebView or we could use Chrome. We'll just say WebView just once. Alright, so this is going to open up Google Books. Okay, and this site doesn't look very good because it's not responsive, but you can buy the ebook here. You can, if they allow you to preview the book, you can do that, and so on. And then if you want to go back to the app, you can just click the back button here, and that should bring us right back. Okay, it brings us to that same page. So that's what we'll be building. Pretty simple, but we'll learn how to fetch data from an API through using the fetch component or the fetch function, and we'll learn about list views and scroll views and all that good stuff. Alright, so thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Alright guys, so we're going to get started on our Bookfinder project. So we're using the Google Books API, and this is going to be really simple. We're actually only going to use one endpoint, and that's this right here. So googleapis.com, books, v1, volumes, and then we're just adding a query of whatever we want to search for. Alright, so we'll make a request with that, we'll get the book data, and then we'll go to a details page and we'll list all that book data. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and open up my command line. I'm using Commander for Windows, and I have 3 command lines open. I would definitely suggest this tool for using Windows. It makes things really much easier. So we're going to create the application. So we're going to say React, React Native, and let's do init, and we're going to call this Bookfinder. Okay, so that'll create that project folder. And then at the same time over here, I'm just going to run Android AVD, and that's going to open up the virtual device manager, and then we can just say start. Alright, so that should launch. And let's also add the project to Atom. So let's see, where am I? Projects, React, and Bookfinder. Alright, and that's still going. Okay, so now that that's done, we can go ahead and run the React Native packager by saying React. Actually, we have to go into that folder first, so cd Bookfinder, and then React Native start, and that'll start the packager up. Okay, once that's ready, then we're going to go down here and cd into Bookfinder, and from here we're going to run React Native and then run Android, and that should open it up on our virtual device. Alright, so that's opening up. And there it is. So there's our application. Now we're going to go to Atom, and let's create a new folder called App. And we're going to create a folder called Components. And let's create our first component. We'll do the toolbar because that's the easiest. So let's say new folder. We'll call it Toolbar. And then inside there, let's create a new file, and we'll save that as toolbar.js. All right. So we're going to want to open index.android.js. And let's get rid of these comments. And what I'll do is just copy everything here and then paste it in the toolbar. And we're just going to change this. And you also want to change it down here. So Bookfinder should now be toolbar there and here. Okay, and we'll just get rid of these styles. And then this is actually going to be really simple. We're just going to let's keep one of these texts inside the view. And we're just going to change this from container to toolbar view. And then this is going to be toolbar text. Okay, and then what we're going to do is pass in a title when we load the toolbar because we want it to be dynamic. We want it to change based on which page we're on. So that's going to come in as a property. So we can say this.props.title. Okay, now we probably want to set a default just in case we don't pass a title in. So let's go right here. We're going to say static default props, and we're going to set that to an object and then say title, and we'll set it to Bookfinder. Alright, and let's go ahead and save that. Actually, let's add the styles down here. So toolbar view, and we're going to set that to an object and add our styles. So we'll have a background color, and let's set that to black, and let's set the padding to 10. Alright, then we'll do the text, and we're going to set the color of the text to white since it's on a black background. And I also want to align to the center. So that'll be text align center. Alright, so we'll save that, and then we'll go to our index Android, and we want to bring this in. So we'll say import toolbar, and that's going to be from the app folder / the components folder / toolbar / toolbar. And then we're just going to put that, we're actually going to use the Navigator, but for now, just to make sure it shows, let's just put it here. Okay, and we'll save that. Alright, so there's the toolbar. The reason it's in the middle there is because of this styling. We're actually going to get rid of all this and save. And there it is. There's our title bar or toolbar. Now if we want to pass in a title, we could put something here. We could say welcome and save that, and now that's going to change. But I'm actually going to just keep it at Bookfinder. Alright. Now I just want to make the background of the entire app gray, a light gray. So what we'll do here is take this container style and go down here and say container and set the background color and set that to 6 C's. Is that 6? No, that's 7. Alright, and then for the height, I want that to cover the entire background. So what we can do is we can bring in something called dimensions up here, and then for the height we're going to set it to dimensions.get, and we want to get the window, and we want the height, so .height, and let's save that. and you'll see the background is now all gray no matter what the height is. It's getting the height dynamically. Alright, so in the next video we're going to implement the Navigator so that we can have multiple pages. So we want to have a books component, which will be the landing page. That'll have the search form and the list of books, and then we'll also have a book details page for when we click on an individual book. Alright, so that's what we'll get to next. Hey guys, in this video we're going to implement the Navigator so that we can have multiple pages, or what's called a scene, in React Native. So we need to go to index.android and we're going to bring in the Navigator. And then we're going to go down to the render, and we're actually going to get rid of this. We're not going to return a view, we're going to return the Navigator. Alright, now this is going to take in a couple properties. So we want to add the initial route, basically which scene we want as the landing page. So we're going to set that to ID and then books. Okay, now this could be anything. This could be title or name or whatever you want. I chose ID, but it could be anything, and then you can access it by that key. All right, we're also going to have render scene, and this is basically telling it which function we want to use to render the scene. So we're going to just call it render scene. Okay, and then we need one more, that's configure screen. Okay, so configure screen, and we're going to set that, and this is going to be an arrow function, which is going to take a route, and then also the route stack, and we're going to set that as an arrow function, and then say navigator, navigator.scene configs, and then we'll say dot float from right. Okay, you have a couple different options how you want the pages to come in, and we're going to just have it float in from the right, or slide in. Alright, so now that we have that in the render, we're going to now create this render scene function. So let's go right above it, and we'll say render scene. Okay, and then this is going to take in route, and that'll include any parameters, including the ID, and then also the navigator object itself. Alright, and then what we'll do is we're going to check for the IDs that it's being passed in, and then we're going to have different cases depending on what that ID is. So we'll use a switch, and you could just as well use an if statement, but what we're going to do here is pass in route.id. So it's going to look at this here, and the initial route is going to have the ID of books. So let's create a case for books. Alright, so we'll say, that's not it, case books, and put a colon there, and then we just want to return, and in here is what we want to happen when we visit the books page or the book scene. And what we want is just a view, and again we're just going to give it the style of the container. Alright, and then in here we're going to have our toolbar, and then we want the books component, which we haven't created yet. Okay, now when we load a scene or a page like this, we want to also pass in the navigator so that we can use it to do redirects from within this component. So we're going to pass that in as a property. We'll say navigator, and that's going to equal navigator. Okay, we also want to pass in a title, and that's going to be books. Alright, so let's go ahead and save this, and we need to now create the books component. So let's go over to components and create a new folder called books. Okay, we're getting an error here because it doesn't know what books is yet. And then we'll create the file, which will be books.js. Okay, and then what I'll do is just copy the stuff from the toolbar, paste it in here, and then let's change this. Okay, we don't need default props, And let's get rid of these styles, change this to books, and change this to books. And then for now, let's see. For now, we'll just put some text in here, and we'll just say books component. And we can get rid of this style. Okay, so now let's save that. And now it should display the books component if we reload. Unexpected token, index Android. Oh, question mark. That's wrong. Alright, so let's save that. And let's see, we may have to do a manual reload by double tapping R. Whoop. Oh, sometimes that happens. So let's go ahead and open it back up and reload. Looks like it's looking at the cached version. Cannot find variable books. Oh, that's right. We didn't bring it into index Android, so it doesn't know what it is. So let's import books from app/component/ not toolbar, books/books. What is this? Unable to resolve module. Let's see why. Default class books, that's correct. Just try reloading again. Let me check the path again. Oh, there's no S in components. There we go. Okay, so now the books component is showing. And it's showing because that's our initial route. So we're going to be working in this file quite a bit, this books.js. What I'm going to do now is just add the text input. So let's go, let's bring that in. Say text input. And we're going to put that, actually let's change this right here to container. And then we're going to put it right here. So text input. And that's going to have some properties. First of all, let's add a style, and we'll set it to styles dot text input. Let's add a placeholder. So for that, we'll just say search books. And let's see, a value. So the value is going to be a state value. So this.state.text. And then it's also going to have an onChangeText. And this is going to be a handler for, and then we want to call a function. And we also want to pass along the value. So we're going to do an arrow here, pass in text. And then it's going to call a function called this.onTextChange. This dot on text change, and then pass along text. All right, so let's add the state up here. So right here. So when we add state, we need to do it in the constructor. So let's put we need to call the super function, or we'll get an error. And then we want to do this dot state, and we're going to set text. By default, it's just going to be a blank string. Okay, and then when we start to type, it's going to look for this function. So let's create that. Okay, and let's see, that's going to be passed in text. And for right now, let's see what we're going to do. We're going to just change the value of text in the state. So this dot set state, and we want to change text to text, which is being passed in, and then let's do a callback function, and we'll just say console.log, and we'll just log this dot state dot text. So it should log whatever we type in. All right. Now we're actually going to be including a function here. Actually, I'll put to do, and this is going to be the fetch books function, and that's going to reach out to the API and grab the books, and then we want to bring them back and create something called a list view so that we can list them out, and we'll go from there. All right, so let's just try this out. We'll save it. Now, in order to log, we're going to go over here and just run React Native, and then just say log-android. Okay, and that'll show us a continuous log. Now, let's see what this is. Null is an object. This dot state dot text. All right, let's try and just manually reload by double tapping R. Okay, so now we have our input right here. And if I click in here and I start to type, you'll see down over here in the log, it outputs whatever I'm putting in there. So if we type in test, and this is very slow, but that's because it's a virtual device. And you can see that it's logging whatever we type in. So that's what we want at the moment. So in the next video, what we're going to do is we're going to implement the fetch. This right here, fetch books. We want to reach out to the API using a function called fetch, and then we want to put it into a list view. Okay, so I will see you in the next video. Alright, so in the last video, we went ahead and created the books component. We added the navigator. We have the search box here. Now what we want to do is implement the API. We want to fetch the data as we type in the search box. So we have this function here in books.js on text change, and down here we want to call a function called fetch books. Okay, so let's just remove this to do, and we're going to call this dot fetch books. Okay, and we'll create that right here. And let's see, we're going to use fetch, and then we want to pass in the URL. So that's going to be this right here. So googleapis.com/books/v1/volumes $Q equals, and then whatever that search term. This is actually going to be replaced with the state value. So we just want to concatenate here this dot state dot text. Okay, and that changes as we type in the input box. So it's going to make a request every time. So let's take this semicolon off, and we're just going to do a dot then. And we want this to be in JSON, so we're going to take the response and we're going to just map it to response.json. And we're going to add another dot then. And from here, we're going to pass in, again, response. And we're going to use an arrow function here. And then what we want to do is set the state with the response. Okay, we want to set the data source. Now, with list views, it's a little complicated to explain. Let's go to the documentation here. So we'll say React Native list view. So what we need to do here is in the constructor, we're going to create a variable called ds, set it to a new ListView.data source, and then we have to put this weird stuff in here. Basically, we're passing in row 1 and row 2, and we're setting it to as long as R1 is not equal to R2. Okay, so we have to have that, and then in our state we're going to set a data source value to that DS variable and then clone with rows, and then from there we can pass in our array. Now we're not going to actually enter the data in here in the constructor. We're going to do it in the fetch books because we have to wait for that response so that we can get the book data, the array, and then put it into clone with rows. So right now what we'll do in the constructor is we'll create, let's say, const ds and equal ListView, and of course we have to bring that in, so let's just do that real quick. Oops, ListView, and we'll say actually this should be new ListView dot data source, and then we want to pass in an object, and we're going to say row has changed, and then we're going to just set in parentheses R1, R2, and then we're going to have an arrow function, and then we're going to do R1 is not equal to R2. Okay, so I know that looks a little weird. I actually hope that they change this and make it a little more readable. But that's the DS value. Now what we want to do is set in the state a data source, and I'm just going to say book data source because you may have more than one data source. And we're going to just set that to DS. Okay, we're not going to do the clone with rows here like they did in the constructor because we don't have the data yet. We need to fetch it with this function and then fill it. Alright, so let's go down to fetch books, and we want to say this dot set state, and we want to take that book data source and we want to set that to this dot state dot book data source, and then we want to do our clone with rows. So clone with rows, and then this is going to give us back our response, but the array that we want with all the books is actually in an array called items. So we want to say response dot items, and that'll put that in the list view. Alright, so I know it's maybe a little tough to understand. Just know that we're initializing the data source up here, and then we're filling it here after we make our request. So now that we've filled the data source, as we type, we need to output it. Okay, so if we look at the documentation, you'll see that we're rendering a list view and then adding that data source that's in state. And then we have a function called render row that will take that data and do whatever we want with it. We can display it however we want. We can style it however we want. So let's go down to the render, and we're going to go right here and just get rid of this text. We don't need that anymore. And we're just going to put in list view. Okay, and then we're going to add the data source, which is going to be from our state. Actually, you want an equal sign there. And then this dot state dot, and we called it book data source. And then we also want to add render row, and we just want to set that to a function called render row, and we'll create that. So let's go right above this, and we'll say render row, and from here we're actually going to have access to each value or each item, which is going to be a book, so I'm going to call this book. Okay, now each row we're going to wrap with a touchable highlight component because we want to be able to click on that and have an effect and then have it redirect us to the details page, but we'll get to that in a little bit. Right now we're just going to put in a view, and let's give that a style, and we'll set that to styles styles.row. Okay, and then in here let's put view, and we'll give this a style of styles.bookinfo. We're going to put an image above it too, but I'm not going to do that just yet. In here we're going to have a text, and let's give that a style. We'll say styles.bookinfo. Actually, no, not bookinfo. Styles.title. And then we should have access to this book right here. All right, now we want to render the title, and if we look at, let's go back to that, where is it? Yeah, this right here. And let's do a little search here. We'll paste that in, and let's just put in here, we'll say HTML. So this should make a GET request and get us all the books in HTML that match that search string. So you can see this is the items that I was talking about. It puts everything in the items array, and then we have access to all of this stuff for each book, which is a ton of stuff. What I want to grab is this title right here, and you can see that's actually in an object called volume info. Okay, all this data here is in that object. So what we need to do to output it is we need to say book dot volume info dot title. Okay, so we're probably going to get some kind of error, but let's just save this and see what happens. Okay, evaluating data source dot row identities. You know, let's try manually reloading. Okay, and let's just type something in here. I'm just going to put an H. Okay, so unhandled promise rejection, static render. Oh, this render row, we actually have to return all this. We can't just put it in like that. So let's say return, and then we're going to wrap it all in parentheses. Like that. Alright, we'll save that. And there we go. Look at that. It updated. It's giving us everything with H. If we do HT, it's very slow that this entering the text. And it makes another request, gets everything with HT. Let's put an M and an L. And there we go. It gets us, what is that, 10 different books with that match HTML. And I believe if we do a hard reload, that message will go away. Alright, so let's just type in an H. And there we go. Alright. So in the next video, we're going to wrap each one of these in a touchable highlight component, and we're going to add a function to it called PressRow, and then when we press it, we'll have a function fire off, and that'll redirect us to the details page, which we still have yet to create. Okay, so that's it, and I will see you in the next video. Alright guys, in the last video we created the fetch books function, and we reached out to the API, and we're pulling back a response every time we enter in a character in the text input. So what I want to do now is wrap these in a touchable highlight and then have them go to the details page, which we still have to create. So up here in Books.js, we're going to bring in touchable highlight, and then go back down to render row, and we're going to wrap this view in touchable highlight, and then let's give it an on press, and we're going to set that equal to some curly braces, and we're going to have a parentheses and then an arrow function, and we're just going to call a function called PressRow, and we want to pass along that particular book, which comes from here. Okay, we have to add an ending tag for that. And right above it, we'll create PressRow. And that takes in the book. And then all we need to do here is just navigate to the details page and pass the book data with it. So we can say this.props.navigator, and we want to use .push here, and that's to change the page. And then in here we just pass along an object with the ID of the scene or the page that we want to go to, which is going to be details. And then we just want to pass along the book just like that, and then we'll have access to it. Alright, so let's save that. And actually, before we go any further with that, let's set the styles, because that doesn't look too good. So we're going to add in our styles down here. So let's say row. And row is going to have a flex direction of row. Okay, we're using flexbox here. And then justify content. We're going to set that to center. And let's set a padding of 12. We'll set a background color of kind of a dark gray. And then a margin bottom of 3. Okay, so that'll be for each row here. What else? So for book info, actually we need a comma right there. Book info. Oh, we forgot to add the image too. I'll do that in a second. We're just going to set that to flex 1, and then we're going to set margin left to 5. Okay, we also have the title, and I'm going to set the color of that to white and make the font size a little bigger. So let's say font size 18. And then we're going to have a thumbnail. So let's say thumb. And I'm just going to set the width of that to 64. And also the height to 64. So now let's go up here to where we're outputting the title right here. And we're going to keep that, but we're also going to put the subtitle under it, because it also fetches a subtitle. So we'll just give that a style of subtitle and then just change this. So let's save that so far. And that should, there we go. Let's see, why is this subtitle not showing? Whoop. We might have to reload this. Huh. Not sure why the subtitle's not showing. It should. Or maybe there just isn't any for this. Oh yeah, okay, so it is showing. It's the dark down here. Those particular books didn't have a subtitle. So we also want to bring in the image, and there's actually an image component with React Native. So let's bring that in. And then we're going to go back down here and go above the book info view. And we just want to put in image. And we're going to set the style to styles.thumb. And then we need to set a source. Okay, so for the source, we want to use this double curly brace, and we want to specify a URI, and that's going to come from book.volume.info. Is it volume info? Yeah. And then .imagelinks.thumbnail. Okay, so let's save that. And there we go. Now we have the image of each book. Cool. So if I click on one of these, it's going to look for the details component. Okay, and there isn't one, so we have to add that. Oh, we also need to bind this to PressRow, and we should also do it to RenderRow as well. Now, instead of doing it here, saying .bind this, I'm just going to put it in the constructor, which is common practice. So let's do that. So what we have to do is say this dot PressRow is going to be set to this dot PressRow dot bind, and we want to pass in this. Okay, we'll do the same with RenderRow. All right. So we'll save that, and then let's go to index.android, and we're going to create another case here for details. So I'll copy this and put that there, and this will be details. Still, we're going to have the toolbar. Now for the title of the toolbar, I actually want that to be the name of the book. So remember up here we passed in route. Well, since we sent along, let's see, when we press a row and we navigate to details, we're passing along book. So we have access to that from within here as route.book. Okay, so what we can do is in the title, we'll set that equal to route.book.volumeinfo.title. Alright, and then we're going to just output the book details component once we create it. We're going to send the navigator. For the title, we'll say details, and then we also want to send route.book. So we're going to send that as book. That way we have access to all of that data within the details component. Alright, and we'll have to bring that in up here. So input book details /app components book details. Alright. So let's save that, and then we're going to go and create that in components. New file, bookdetails.js, and let's just copy what we have in the toolbar. That's a nice and easy component, and we'll change this, get rid of this, and let's see, get rid of the styles and change this. Alright. So right now I just want a view, and that's going to have the style of details container, and for now let's just have a text, and we should be able to output the title. Actually, you know what? I don't want to output it as a property. I want to take the book property that we passed in right here, and I want to put that into a state variable. So let's go and create a constructor. Okay, and then that can get passed props, and then we need to call super, and we also need to pass in props, and then we'll just set state, this dot state equals an object, and that's going to have a book, and we'll set it to this dot props dot book, and then down here we'll output this dot state dot book dot volume info dot title. Okay, so we may get an error, we may not. Let's try it out. Okay, I'm just going to make sure I refresh completely. Let's see, we shouldn't be getting that anymore. Oh, I'll have to restart the app. Let's see, Bookfinder. Alright, so let's search. Say HTML. Alright, so that doesn't seem to be working. Whoa, what's this? Looks like we have a loop going on here. During an existing state transition, such as within render, render method should be a pure function of props and state. Guys, I'm going to do a little troubleshooting on this, and I'll be right back. Alright guys, I'm back, and it looks like I had this .renderRow set to this .PressRow bind this. So we just want to change that to renderRow if you hadn't already. Alright, so let's save that, and we'll just do a refresh here. We should be able to refresh this. Alright, so let's just type something in here, pull up some books, and click on one, and it should bring us to the details page. Yep, there we go. So you can see it's displaying the title. Good. So in the next video, we're gonna take this page and style it. We're gonna add the image, a bunch of information, and also a link to preview it on Google Books. Alright, so in this video we're going to create this details page. Okay, so the functionalities there, we're able to click on a book and have it take us to this page. So we're in bookdetails.js, and we're gonna just add some data here, or add some data and styling into the render. First thing I want to have is a go back button. Okay, so inside the details container, let's say button, and we'll actually have to bring that in up here. Okay, so let's see, button, and that's going to have a title of go back, and then we're going to give it a color. Oops. Color is going to be dark gray, and then we'll have an on press, which is going to equal a function that we'll call called go back, and we just want to bind this to that as well. So up here, let's create go back, and all this needs to do is use the Navigator, which is in our props, and we can just say .pop, and that'll take us to the last page. Alright, let's save that. Okay, so there's our go back button, and if I click that, it brings us right back. Okay, and our search results are still there, everything's good, so that works. Now let's go back to the render, and under that button we're going to have the image. Okay, we also have to bring that in up here. So image, let's give it style, which will be styles dot, let's see, styles dot, we'll just say image, actually we'll just say thumb. Well, it's not, you see, it's an actual thumbnail. That's what is returned to us. It's a small image. but I want it to be bigger, so we're going to stretch it out. So some of them may not be the best quality. So let's just give it a style of image, I guess. And then it needs a source. So that's URI. And then we're going to set it to this dot book dot, I'm sorry, this dot state dot book dot volume info dot image links dot thumbnail. Okay, we'll save that. And we need to add the height and width. Actually, let's just put the height and width here, because that's all we're doing with this image. So we'll say width 350, height 200. All right. We are going to add padding, which we'll push this over in a little bit. All right, so let's just continue on with the render. So let's see, we have the image, and then what I'm going to do is create a view right here underneath, and we're going to give this a style of styles.titles, and we're going to have the main title. So I'm just going to copy this, or cut it rather, and put that in here. And then right underneath it, we're going to put the subtitle. And let's just give these text a style of styles.title. And then underneath that view, okay, underneath that titles view, we're going to have another view and give this a style of styles.body. Alright, and then in here we're going to have a bunch of stuff. Let's do the description. Now some descriptions are really long, so I'm going to actually give this an attribute of number of lines. And we can actually truncate it. We can limit the number of lines. We'll say 10. And then we'll give it a style. I'm going to give the description its own style property. Okay, and then in here we just want to do this dot state dot book dot volume info dot description. And then underneath that we'll have the rest of the fields. So let's do text. These are all going to have a style of info. Okay, so this is going to be the author. Now the author is actually an array that it returns, so you could loop through it if you want and output each one, but I'm just going to grab the first one, the first author. Alright, so we can do that by doing this dot state dot book dot volume info and then dot authors, and we just want the first one, so we're going to specify the 0 index. So let's save that so far. Undefined is not an object. This dot state dot book dot volume info dot author 0. That should work. It did work. Unless this is just a single author and that's why it's not working. Let's try to just do that. Huh. Strange. So I guess we'll just skip the author then. Let's do publisher. And we'll change this to publisher. Let's see if that works. There we go, Elite Books. So now I'm just going to copy this text value here, and just paste that in a couple times or a bunch of times. So under the publisher, we'll do the publish date. And we can get that with, let's see, I think it's published date, I think. Let's try that. No, that didn't work. Let's try publish date. You know what, let's do a different book here. The one that I tested with was the HTML. Alright, we'll click on this. Publish date. Okay, so that does work. Publish date. All right. Under that, let's do page count. So we'll change this right here to page count. Actually, that should be an uppercase C. You guys can do whatever data you want. There's a ton more than what I'm gonna do here in the response. If you want to take a look at that, which is all this stuff. Okay. So under the page count, we'll do the rating, the average rating. So that's going to be average rating. And that should be good. So I'm just going to get rid of these two. All right, let's take a look at that. So that works. So underneath that, we want to have another button which is going to bring us to the Google Books preview. So let's put in another button. And that's going to get an on press. And we're going to set that to an arrow function. And then we're going to call this dot, we'll just say button press. And we're going to pass in as a parameter the preview link, which we can get from this dot state dot book dot volume info dot preview link. Okay, so we're going to pass that in, and let's give this a title, this button. We'll give it a title of I don't know, we'll just say read more, I guess. Or no, let's say preview book. And then the color, we'll give it a little bit of color. Let's do a purplish color. So 841584. Okay, and that's going to call this button press. So we need to create that. And that's going to take in the link. Okay, so let's save that, and that button should show up. There it is. Now I want to open the link in a web view browser. So there's actually a component we can use called linking. So we want to bring that in. And then inside button press, we're going to say linking dot can open URL. And what this is going to do is test to see if it's a link that we can actually open. So we need to pass in the link, and then this is asynchronous, so it gives us back a promise. We're going to say dot then, and it's going to give us a true or false value. We're going to call supported, and then we'll just test. We'll say if supported, then we're going to say linking dot and then open URL, and just pass in the link. Okay, else, basically if it's not possible to navigate to it, I'm just going to do, we'll just do an alert. Cannot go to link. And that should do it. So let's save. And then if we click Preview Book, it will ask us if we want to open with WebView Browser Tester, or we can open it with Chrome, and we can say just once or always. I'm just going to say just once. And it should bring us to that page for that book. And there it is, our HTML and CSS. And we can preview it. This doesn't look too good because Google Books isn't responsive for some reason. But you can scroll down and around if you want. Alright, so if we want to go back, we should just be able to push the back button, and that'll take us right back to that page. Alright, now the last thing I want to do, actually there's two more things we need to do. We need to style this. We also need to add in a scroll view, because right now if this goes off the page we won't be able to scroll. So all we need to do is bring in scroll view, and then we're just going to wrap this view in scroll view. Okay. We'll just tab that over. Alright. So now let's style this stuff. So down here, details container. I'm basically just going to add padding 30 to that. And let's see, titles. Let's give these a background color of dark gray. Padding of 10, and let's do margin bottom of 10. Okay, next we'll do the title. Color is going to be white. Okay, we also have the description. And the description, I just want to add margin bottom. Push that stuff down. And then we have the info. We'll set a padding of 5. And let's set a margin top to push it down a little bit. We'll set that to 5 as well. Let's also set a margin bottom. Separate them a little bit. Background color we'll set to a really dark gray. And then the color should be white. Okay, let's save it. And there we go, there's our page. Cool. So we can easily go back. And that's it. Go to another page, another book, and we should be able to scroll. Awesome. Alright guys, so we are done. We now have a book search application, and that little message should go away if I reload manually. Let's try that. Alright, so just to make sure. Okay, so that message is gone. Good. Alright, so that's it, guys, and I will see you in the next project.